last thing they would expect is to find a suitcase with a human body in it.
The big question is, how the hell did he get there?
They were crazy in love at first, but it quickly became tumultuous. There were infidelities. They'd go back and forth. They'd fight. I think they liked the drama of it.
And the next thing coming out of his mouth is, when I get home, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to smash your face in. He said he was leaving and he wasn't coming back.
Were you ever angry enough to want to see him dead?
There were times I wanted him gone, but gone doesn't mean dead.
And Mel just said, well, I'm a single mom now, and now I've just got to get on with my life. I said, well, no, the next thing is we've got to figure out who did this to him. And after I got off the phone, I said, she did it.
They couldn't find any forensic evidence whatsoever to establish that this was a crime scene.
Do you still insist that you're innocent?
Absolutely. I still feel like, how could somebody think that I did that?
I think she did not actually commit the crime.
It turns out it isn't the end of this story.
My name is Megan Sachs. I'm a criminologist at Fairleigh Dickinson University. In simplest terms, criminology is the scientific study of what causes crime and how the criminal justice system responds to crime.
I've written about 25 true crime books over the years, and I think Melanie McGuire's is perhaps one of the most interesting ones and baffling.
This is Melanie McGuire, arrested today minutes after dropping off her children at daycare.
Melanie McGuire, a New Jersey nurse, was accused of killing her husband, cutting up his body and throwing it into the Chesapeake Bay.
In 2007, what was being called the suitcase murder trial was generating an enormous amount of media attention, not just in New Jersey, but all across the country.
3 bizarre discoveries, 3 separate suitcases, all containing human remains.
A woman who was on trial for her very life. She says the real truth behind the crime has never been revealed.
With no history of violence and no apparent motive for murder, could she really have done it?
She was this beautiful young nurse, and they were this seemingly normal middle-class couple, and the murder happened in such a grisly way.
The idea that this beautiful nurse could have actually killed her husband and then cut him up is just incredible.
Of course, there were the salacious aspects.
Mrs. McGuire is a registered nurse, and prosecutors say she had an affair with a doctor.
She didn't fit the profile, I guess, of a murderer.
Over the years, students and colleagues of ours have come to me and said, you know, Melanie McGuire proclaims her innocence and would love to tell her story.
I started thinking, oh, maybe there is a little more to this case than what you just see on the surface. And then the idea of a podcast came up, and I was all in.
On direct appeal, we examined the murder conviction of Melanie McGuire following a highly publicized trial. Looking at the evidence that was presented and the evidence that may have seemed insignificant at the time, we form our own conclusion about Melanie's guilt.
We here at ABC have our own history with the Melanie McGuire case. Back in 2007, ABC's Cynthia McFadden had the first on-camera interview with the mother of 2 on trial for murdering her husband.
Who is the Melanie McGuire you hope the jury knows?
The one who tried to take care of everybody, who didn't make the smartest decisions, but admitted to those mistakes to the people she trusted most, but did not admit what she's accused of. I have been incarcerated for 12 and a half, going on 13 years now.
Do you still insist that you're innocent?
Absolutely.
You're sitting here a wrongfully convicted person.
Correct. Absolutely.
And what have those years been like?
I tell people it's not as bad as you think in some ways, and it's so much worse than I could ever articulate in others. After all these years, I still feel hurt. I still feel bothered. I still feel like, how could somebody think that I did that?
This whole saga begins on May 5th, 2004, with an odd discovery in Virginia Beach.
Early morning, a couple of fishermen and their kids are out on a boat by the Chesapeake Bay.
Me and my friend Don Connors was going to go out fishing, and we both had days off, and D, or Don, we called him D, he said keep his kids out of school, we're going to take them fishing. So everybody was excited. We went right out through this bridge here, and if you keep on going, you'll run right into the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel is about 17.5 miles long. It really is quite astonishing. It connects the eastern shore of Virginia to Virginia Beach.
Has 2 tunnels for 2 shipping channels, and once you get on the other side, you go north, you're up into Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. So we went out there and anchored off of Fisherman's Island, and we were just doing some fishing.
And suddenly, one notices that a suitcase has floated by.
We wheeled the boat around, pulled up alongside it. I immediately thought it probably blew off of a car, you know, and off the luggage rack or something. D and his son had reached over and were trying to pull it up in. It had some weight to it, so I stopped the boat, reached in and helped him pull that thing up in there. And laid it in the floor of the boat.
They found a dark green Kenneth Cole suitcase in pretty good condition that was apparently part of a luggage set of 3.
They put it on board, and the little boy with them is very, very excited. He thinks it's buried treasure, so he wants to open it.
The contents were covered with a thick trash bag, like a hefty bag or something. And I said, uh-oh. I was a little bit nervous then when I saw the black bags in there. So it's a turn to say something to D, and while I was talking to D, the young boy reached down and ripped open the plastic trash bags. There was no doubt of what it was. It was a set of human legs.
There's a pair of male legs from the knee down, look very fresh, and they recoil in horror.
I looked down there and said, oh my gracious. So I closed the bag back up, and I dialed 911.
I was out on patrol in the Chesapeake Bay when I received a radio call. I made arrangements with him to meet me, and he transferred a suitcase over to my boat.
I handed him the luggage, and he seemed surprised. He goes, what do you want me to do with that? And I said, open it up.
I was pretty shocked. I'd never seen a suitcase with body parts in it before. There really wasn't any smell. They actually looked kind of fresh.
The first suitcase being found was big news. It's not, a common find by any means, especially in this area.
This is an alarming story. Everybody wanted to know who the man in the suitcase was.
We kind of figured there had to be other suitcases with other parts in it.
After the initial shock of them finding the suitcase, everyone was just waiting for what was going to wash up next. Chesapeake Bay area, there's a lot of boaters, there are bird watchers, there's Fisherman's Island, a nature sanctuary. This is really kind of a tourist, a fun area.
People are going there to relax or going with their families. The last thing they would expect is to find a suitcase with a human body in it.
It was the start of the summer tourist season, which is huge for Virginia Beach, and getting that kind of negative publicity of bodies washing up in suitcases was something they did not need. 6 days later, the student was on Fisherman's Island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, which is a nature preserve. And she saw a dark green Kenneth Cole suitcase.
She was curious what could be contained inside, and she actually pulled a little bit of the black trash bag out of the suitcase, There was such a strong odor of decomposition that she immediately stopped and notified the refuge workers.
The police, they've been expecting this because after the first Kenneth Cole bag with the legs, they suspected there was going to be more.
It was transported to the medical examiner's office in Norfolk, and that's where we actually viewed what the contents inside.
Inside this suitcase would be the torso and the head of a male. The torso is still attached with the arms and the head.
The head was wrapped in what looked like a medical blanket.
The face was somewhat identifiable, but it had been submerged for a while, so extremely bloated.
The medical examiner is able to determine that the victim's been shot multiple times. There are a couple of gunshot wounds in the torso area and one through the head.
There were 2 bullets that were recovered from the body, wad cutter bullets. And wad cutter bullets are not typically used by the average person, but they are used for target practice.
And it became a very big local story.
A student discovered a suitcase near Fisherman Island. Inside, a human head.
It's getting a lot of coverage.
It's the second suitcase in a week found near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel, and the second one containing body parts.
And everybody was waiting for the rest of the body to turn up.
Well, the third suitcase was found on May 16, 2004 in the water by a fisherman.
He saw the suitcase floating in the water. This third suitcase that had been in the water the longest did have some growth on it from floating in the water for so long.
This suitcase contained the pelvis, so from the waist down to above the knees. Authorities realize they have to figure out who it is.
Anytime you find an unknown body, the first thing you're going to do is look into missing person cases to see if the profile matches anyone who's currently missing.
Because of the naval bases in the area, they're checking military records. They're checking everything they can possibly think of to figure out who this person is.
One of the policemen working on it came up with the idea of getting a sketch artist in.
I immediately took photographs to our sketch artist, and she was able to do a sketch for us, and we eventually released it to the media.
We're hoping maybe this will give us an edge and maybe identify him sooner.
Right now, he's just
John Doe.
May the 21st, Sue sees the picture on TV of a sketch that they had done to find out who this person was.
Sue had been getting out of the shower one morning. The television was on, and as she was getting out, toweling off, she looks at the TV.
This is a sketch of the body that washed ashore near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel this month.
He belongs to somebody. I mean, he's got loved ones.
She thinks, oh my God, that looks like Bill.
Sue was pretty sure that it was Bill McGuire. This is John and Sue Rice, Bill McGuire's good friends. Bill and John had been friends since their early Navy days. Bill was friends with Sue as well. Melanie knew Sue. The couples had vacationed together.
Sue immediately calls her husband to take a look, and he's not so sure it's Bill. But Sue's convinced it is, in fact, and says, please call Crime Stoppers.
He was very good friends with Mr. McGuire. He told me that Mr. McGuire lived in Woodbridge, New Jersey. He was married to Melanie McGuire, and they had 2 small children.
He wanted to know more about the dynamics of Bill, why I thought it could be Bill. And the only way that I thought it could be Bill is that, yeah, he's missing too.
John Rice had spoke to Cindy Lagash, who is William McGuire's sister.
I got a call from Cindy. She said, John, is Billy there? And I said, no, he's not. What's going on? And she said, well, Bill and Melanie got in an argument and he left and he hadn't been heard from.
He said he was leaving and he wasn't coming back. My husband was full of bluster when it came to stuff like that. He would say things like that all the time. I didn't actually believe it was the last time I was ever going to see my husband.
William McGuire had, in fact, vanished. Mr. Rice and his wife, Mrs. Rice, eventually agreed to come down to the police department in Virginia Beach and view some photos.
Bill had a little red mark right here, and that's what I kept zoning in on when I saw the picture. That's exactly what I zoned in on. I mean, I've known Bill for 22 years. I kept seeing that, and I was pretty certain that it was Bill.
Once we had a name and approximate age, we ran him through our computer system.
He ran a check on Bill McGuire, and he found that McGuire had been arrested in Virginia for a reckless driving charge in the 1980s.
His fingerprints were on file already, which made it a lot easier, and they're very quickly able to confirm that the fingerprints matched.
The man in the suitcases was identified as 39-year-old William McGuire of Woodbridge, New Jersey.
So according to Melanie, she just thinks her husband is missing, but she is about to get the news that will change her life forever.
And he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, ma'am, that William is deceased." And I just burst into tears.
Now they've solved the mystery of who the man in the suitcase is. The big question is, how the hell did he get there? The Melanie McGuire story is centered around New Jersey. They lived in the working class part of New Jersey where The Sopranos took place, which was perhaps the hottest show at the time.
Melanie is a Jersey girl, born and raised there. Her parents are Linda and Michael Caporero.
She's a great, great daughter, mother, friend, full of life, fun-loving, a good girl, never in trouble, never in trouble.
Always trying to help people.
She's working in the restaurants in Jersey. She's a waitress, and she met Bill McGuire. He was also a server.
Bill was known as the rude waiter because he would speed people up in a jocular way, but they loved it, and they would ask for the rude waiter.
What was he like?
Funny, clever. He had a big heart when he wanted to. He wanted all the right things.
He was very, very loyal. He was a tremendous friend. When I first met Bill, I didn't know what to make of him because he was really a practical joker and whatnot, and I thought, well, this guy could probably get on somebody's nerves with all this. But he was so funny, he just kind of overcame whatever resistance you might have to him.
Melanie was a fertility nurse when I met her. She's just so caring, so nurturing.
She was working with women who were going through really tough times, trying to get pregnant. She was very compassionate, and her patients really loved her.
What made you a good nurse?
Type A personality. The way I looked at it, I was not going to be happy with anything less than the total comfort level of my patients.
In 1998, Bill called John and I and told us that he wanted to bring Melanie down to meet us. Melanie, she's a really nice person to be around. Physically, she's beautiful. She's very smart.
She had a lot of the same sense of humor that Bill had. When Bill was making jokes, Melanie would be right in there.
He liked to razz people. She would razz him right back. He really was crazy about her.
What was your relationship with Bill like in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was the challenge, it was the chase. It was, we had a bit of a tempestuous relationship even before we got married. We would break up, get back together.
Bill and Melanie dated for quite a while. They were crazy in love at first, but it quickly became tumultuous. There were infidelities, they'd go back and forth, they'd fight. I think they liked the drama of it.
I think she thought she could make a difference in his life. I think she thought that she could maybe change him, make him happy. She truly did love him.
You guys want some more champagne? All right, let me go get a bottle. Because there's nothing in there, is there?
They got married in 1999. It was probably one of the most extravagant weddings we've ever been to.
Mr. and Mrs. William McGuire! Melanie, on her wedding day, looked absolutely gorgeous, angelic, just perfect.
Both Bill and Melanie seemed like they couldn't have been happier.
She was a little naughty.
He was marrying a girl that he absolutely loved in a way that maybe he hadn't loved anybody before.
Bill, could you put your hand up? This is the last time Bill's going to have the upper hand.
Bill McGuire got a $65,000 a year job with the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
Bill and Melanie settle into a rented townhouse in Woodbridge, New Jersey.
Woodbridge is a sprawling, densely populated township on the suburban end of New Jersey's industrial flatlands. If you're going down I-95, you're taking exit 11 to get off to Woodbridge.
We were both happy, new parents, and then things changed drastically.
He had a dual personality. He could be very likable, and then on the other hand, he'd be very calculating, manipulate you.
He had always had issues with gambling, and he would go through periods where he would go down to Atlantic City a lot.
There were times that he would just take off to AC and gamble, and you wouldn't hear from him, wouldn't know what was going on.
He found he could make some money gambling. There were good times with that, and there were bad times, and there were a couple of times I put my foot down, and I said, that's it, no more. So then he would get involved in the stock market. He wanted what he wanted, and he couldn't get it fast enough. And with that came frustration, and eventually that frustration became directed at me. There was one particular argument over the phone where he had gotten stopped for a traffic ticket. He had an absolutely atrocious driving record. So I started to argue back, and the next thing coming out of his mouth is, when I get home, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to smash your face in.
It's very difficult for me to think back on it because I actually drove off in the middle of the night, and I had left and I should have stayed gone.
Why did you stay?
I wasn't strong enough to leave.
Did you love him?
I did, and even though, now at this point, bear in mind, I'm having an affair.
What appealed to you about Brad Miller?
He was just very, very tender. I really tried to fight it, but I couldn't fight it.
Life for the McGuires is getting a little more complicated, and then one night, it all erupts.
Bill was probably the most streetwise person I've ever known, and I can tell you he never saw it coming.
Melanie is loving, caring, funny, considerate. We just clicked right away, to the point that I asked her to be in my wedding when I got married.
Love is always patient and kind. It is never jealous. Love is never boastful or conceited, and is not resentful. Love takes no pleasure in other people's sins, but delights in the truth.
In June 2001, the McGuires were already married for a few years. And even though there was some friction in the marriage, Melanie McGuire decided to have another child.
Little does her husband know just how ill-timed this pregnancy is. Not only is Melanie about to have their second child, she's also having an affair.
Dr. Bradley Miller was a partner in RMA Associates, and Melanie was working as one of his nurses.
He was so kind. I'd come back to my desk after a long meeting with a patient, and there'd be lunch sitting on my desk waiting for me. You know, there was always a little bit of flirtation, banter back and forth.
Melanie was about 38 weeks pregnant, and things changed between her and Dr. Miller.
I was about to go out on maternity leave, and I was sitting actually in his office at his desk. I just mentioned I have a pinched nerve in my neck, and he put his hands on my shoulders and started to rub my back. I really tried to fight it because this was not going to be good. This was not going to be good for anybody, but I couldn't fight it.
After Melanie came back from maternity leave, she and Dr. Miller started a full-blown affair, and it seemed like they were falling in love with each other, although they were both married with young children.
Shortly after my second son was born, that's when things began the final descent downhill, if you will.
Melanie and Bill moved to the Woodbridge apartment. This is a townhome. They don't own it, they're renting it.
He was constantly looking at homes. He wanted to end up buying a house before he turned 40.
He did want to move down here to Virginia Beach. We took pictures of houses in our neighborhood, but Melanie just would not hear of it.
They ended up putting a really sizable deposit down on a very nice home in New Jersey.
It was a very nice house. It had quite a bit of land. It was a $500,000 home.
It was very contradictory. She's becoming closer to Dr. Miller, but she's going along with Bill's idea of buying a house.
The marriage wasn't going well at all. So why were you buying this $500,000 house together then?
The idea for me was we had a chunk of money, cash, that we were putting down on this house. In the past, we had come to points where we had been in similar situations, and he would, ultimately something would happen and he would go and gamble the money away. I figured this at least was an investment.
On April 28th, they're due to close on the house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she's in constant touch with Dr. Miller, who's pleading with her not to buy the house. He wants to be with Melanie, and he sees a future life with her.
And Melanie told him that, you know, not to worry about it, it's going to be okay, I'll take care of it.
After they close on the house, they go back to their rented townhouse. Bill is so excited. He calls John Rice. John said that Bill had never been happier. The last person Melanie speaks to that night is Dr. Miller. She tells him, look, we've closed on the house. Bill's had some red wine. He's asleep on the couch, but when he wakes up, we're going to sort this out, and I'm going to tell him I want a divorce.
Melanie described the events that would happen later on as a big fight.
You and Bill had a horrible fight, yes?
Correct. We fell asleep on the couch, woke up early morning hours, and it was never a bad time for an argument. I'm talking probably 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And it starts on the house. I settled for that house. The hell are you talking about? You settled for that house. It's a $500,000 house. That's not what I wanted.
Melanie says that Bill turned around and said, what I really wanted was a house in Virginia for cheaper, but you refused to let us do that, and so I have to settle. And she says this turns into a very heated argument.
From there, things became more physical.
How physical? In what way?
He shoved a dryer sheet in my mouth. He had a thing about dryer sheets.
The story that Melanie tells about a fight that seems to escalate over a dryer sheet is the same story she told us back when we first spoke with her.
We're still arguing, and there's the laundry basket, and there's a dryer sheet just hanging out of one of the baby's sleeves. He hated them. He thought it was lazy that I wouldn't stand there and put in the liquid fabric softener, and yeah. And it went out of control. This was the type of mother I was, that I would leave this sheet in there for my baby to possibly choke on. Before I know it, I'm up against the wall, and the dryer sheet is being shoved into my throat. And then he just smacked me.
In the face?
Yeah, open hand, because he probably would have broken my cheek if it had been a closed fist. And I looked down, and there's my 2-year-old.
I grabbed the baby and went to the bathroom right behind me and shut the door. I just wanted away from him at that point. He said he was leaving and he wasn't coming back, and I could tell my children why they didn't have a father.
Did he say this to you through the bathroom door?
Yeah, through the bathroom door the entire time. I imagine he was packing things and leaving. He was up and down the stairs a lot, but every trip back and forth berating me.
What's the last thing you remember saying to him?
Stop. Stop.
Melanie said he'd driven off, and she presumed he was in Atlantic City.
He would have been back. He would have been back. I knew it.
But this isn't just a few days that Bill McGuire is gone. We're talking weeks.
What bothered me was that Melanie never reached out and said, hey, Bill's missing.
She never reported her husband missing, and it's almost 30 days.
The fact that we never heard anything from her was deeply suspicious to me.
Love is always ready to excuse, to trust, to hope, and to endure whatever comes. Love does not come to an end. This is the word of the Lord.
In the early morning hours of April 29, 2004, Melanie McGuire said that she and her husband Bill had a violent fight and that he left and she never saw him again.
Melanie says the next day she got her kids up, she took them to daycare, and she started trying to figure out how she was going to move on with her life without Bill.
And during the next day, the day after that, you didn't hear anything from him?
No.
Did you try calling him directly?
No, because this is what used to happen when we fought. You know, I'd call, whether it was to tell him off or to try to apologize or what. We just end up getting back into it again. I'm done now. I'm done.
She retains a divorce attorney, and at this point she does tell the divorce attorney that she has not seen her husband in a few days. And according to Melanie, the attorney advised her not to file a missing persons report.
My heart broke for her. She didn't deserve, nobody deserved that. But I told her that, you know, she needed to think about herself right now. She needs to protect herself.
I called a business associate of mine who was an attorney. She said, you need to get a restraining order.
State your full name.
Melanie McGuire.
She had to go in front of a judge and give sworn statement about the incident that happened.
Tell me what happened that brought you to court today for temporary restraining order.
My husband and I closed on our first house on Wednesday.
That should be a positive thing, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should. He's been behaving really erratically.
Ms. McGuire, you're safe here. Don't worry.
Melanie explained to the judge how Bill had been violent with her.
Did he hit you, ma'am?
No, not until, well, I don't mean to sound like I had absolutely no part in this. I said some not nice things and slapped me.
As part of the questions, Melanie was asked by the judge if she owned any firearms.
Do you know if there's any weapons?
Not to my knowledge.
This is a sketch of the body that washed ashore near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel this month.
We're hoping maybe this will give us an edge and maybe identify him sooner.
About a month goes by between the time that Bill disappears and when Sue Rice identifies Bill McGuire after seeing the sketch on local TV. The next thing police have to do is notify Melanie McGuire of the death of her husband.
Melanie was asked to come down to the police station.
The officer came out and he says, "Is your husband William McGuire?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, ma'am, that William is deceased." And I just burst into tears.
But there's one thing she never asked. How was Bill McGuire murdered?
They did not tell her how and the condition in which he was found.
That would be one of the first questions that I would ask.
The next step was that the Virginia police wanted to speak with Melanie. Melanie agrees, but she brings her divorce attorney with her and another criminal attorney in that practice.
Conducting an interview with the victim's wife with two attorneys present is highly unusual. First time I have ever had that happen to me. She was nervous, she was visibly shaking, she made expressions like she was crying, but she never had a tear in her eye. I asked her if she had any luggage, and she informed us that they didn't have any matching luggage.
The next day, Melanie told detectives she suddenly remembered that the McGuires did own a matching set of designer luggage.
I showed her a picture of one of the pieces of luggage that we recovered in the bay, and she identified that as belonging to them.
They asked what kind of person Bill was, and she said he was the kind of person that had a knack for pissing people off.
She asked us, where did we find her husband's vehicle at? I told her at that point we hadn't found her husband's vehicle. And she said that probably a good place to look would be Atlantic City, New Jersey. She also informed us that her husband had a gambling problem.
Did he get involved with the wrong people? That's what I would have to believe, that he had gotten himself into something, and Bill always thought he could handle everything.
He was always into some kind of deal, so I think maybe this deal was his last deal.
After the interview was done that evening, we also conducted a search at their old apartment building. The apartment was empty. She had already moved out.
They asked him about Bill's possessions and his clothes.
We discovered that Miss McGuire had already given all of her husband's belongings away.
Virginia Beach detectives find out that Melanie McGuire had given most of Bill's belongings away to a friend's cousin, and they wanted to track that man down. Eventually they did and found out that most of Bill's clothing was still in black trash bags, much like the bags that contained Bill McGuire's body parts.
The garbage bag, by sight, looked identical.
Things are starting to make sense with the detectives. There's black trash bags, and there was also the hospital blanket that the head was wrapped into. And they're thinking, well, Melanie McGuire is a nurse. That's kind of an odd coincidence.
At Melanie's suggestion, detectives start to search Atlantic City for Bill's car. And lo and behold, that's exactly where they find it.
The Atlantic City forensic unit processed Mr. McGuire's vehicle. They took photos, they fingerprinted, they vacuum cleaned the floorboards.
The body was released to Melanie on a Tuesday. Immediately she had him cremated. And the funeral lasted all of 10-15 minutes at the most. She called the following evening after the funeral, and at that point I just kind of blasted her. I just told her, I said, Melanie, Bill deserves so much more. And Mel just said, well, I'm a single mom now, and now I've just got to get on with my life. I said, well, no, the next thing is we've got to figure out who did this to him. And after I got off the phone, I remember hanging it up, and I said, John, she did it. She did it.
Everything pointed to Melanie McGuire.
Through wiretapping her phones, the police discovered the relationship that she was having with Dr. Miller.
It's a eureka moment because it provides motive.
I've told them everything that I know. But they're, they just don't.
They want you to break.